Hi, I'm Mathew Schwartz, executive editor with Information Security Media Group. And as the pace of online attacks seems like it's getting faster and faster, organizations are also, of course, having to respond in a more quick manner. So to help me discuss incident response and best practices, I'm joined by Dr. Chris Pierson, CEO of BlackCloak. Chris, it's always a pleasure to see you in our studios, virtual or otherwise.
Hey, Matt, thank you so much. Always a pleasure to be here.
So the speed at which events are happening these days, it just seems nuts. We've seen attacks of a major scale and scope that seem to unfold at least relatively quickly, like with the Excellion, for example, file transfer appliance. They hit fast, they hit hard. We've also seen things like the SolarWinds supply chain attack, which maybe happened over a long time frame, but you had FireEye saying, we've been breached, and then very shortly thereafter saying, unfortunately, everyone's been breached. Yeah. So is this true? I mean, do things seem to be speeding up to you, and why is that happening?
Yeah, I think a few things here. Number one, the speed at which these items are actually kind of having that LinkedIn effect in terms of not just one company being impacted, but immediately the N+1. What other company, what other technology, that is increasing as well. And a lot of this we're seeing because it is through third parties. So it's going to be third parties that companies share in common in terms of common software, common appliances, common sets of frameworks, is that once you hit one, you're not able to just hit one. You're really hitting 200, 2,000, 20,000, as we saw in the case of some of the items from SolarWinds here. So what we are seeing is that the speed at which once one company says, hey, I've been impacted, it really goes to that nth degree where it's 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 companies that are having to check and say, am I also impacted? And it's no longer a 3-month or 90-day, learning cycle by which you can say, hey, show me some of the TTPs, show me some of the IOCs, show me some of the things that were part of your breach. And so I can defend against them. It's just you go ahead and you do the forensics, you do the incident response, and it turns into oh darn, we're also impacted. So speed is definitely one of those main elements.
That's a fascinating point you raised, because historically data breaches were someone like an Equifax going, oh, whoops, we forgot to do something. But as you've just highlighted, so many of these recent breaches have to do with, we were hacked in this manner, and all of a sudden everybody else goes, oh, we use that product too. Oh, it turns out the US government's heavily standardized on something that a lot of people had never heard of before. And attackers figured that out and they used it to their advantage. So when it comes to these breaches or these incidents that organizations have to respond to, who all needs to be involved?
Yeah, I think we're still evolving there. I don't think we have it yet really correct, right? This is not just because it's a cybersecurity incident or an incident involving ones and zeros doesn't necessarily mean that the team lead is the CISO each and every time, right? That doesn't mean that it's the CISO team and the infrastructure team and it's a pure tech response. These things need to be practiced collaboratively together, so that security is involved, legal is involved, PR, marketing, the board, right? Other advisors, privacy, legal, compliance, public relations, the business line, right? They're the owners of it, right? They are the people that actually own the doing. They own the client relationships. All of these parties need to be involved at the table in terms of preparation, pre-planning, talking, understanding what is happening. It's the same thing with same thing in terms of pandemic planning. Same thing as in terms of you have a tornado or a hurricane hit the office. It's not just hey, the folks that are in charge of the physical operational aspects of the office are the ones that need to be there and are running the show. Certainly an important part, but what files need to be looked at? How do people need to be cared for from a human perspective? It's all of those interdimensions need to be brought in together. And what we still see a lot of is cybersecurity leading the planning of the response, leading the planning of the guides, of the books, of the guidelines that they're going to go ahead and respond to and orchestrating those, but not as much from both internal and external people coming together. And it's been harder this past year. So we still want that team to be the company as it relates to the entire team that needs to be brought to bear.
So as you raised, the pandemic has changed the way that we're working, possibly in ways that people don't even fully realize. I mean, everyone knows they're remote, but a lot of business processes have adapted, been forced to adapt. Maybe there's been some streamlining, hopefully, in how these things are working. But when you can't get everyone together just in the building, say all hands meeting, how does an organization begin to conceptualize these new dynamics of response?
Yeah, so data breach response, incident response has always been a blend of both in-person meetings and long phone calls and phone trees where everyone wants to attend. And it, right, you have to crop those back. And so they've really done a good job over the years, over the past maybe 10, 15 years of actually understanding who to invite and what to do as it relates to meetings about the breaches or potential breach or potential incident. But I mean, this is a whole new dynamic. You can't just walk down the hall and grab someone. You can't just go ahead and take over 2 conference rooms. And, you know, as is common within most organizations, they basically declare this area off limits and it's a war room. And right there, right, the product manager, there's gonna be a program manager that's handling things, the legal director, everyone just kind of moves into that space and it's live, real time, iterative. That doesn't exist in terms of the digital sphere and as easy a way, shape, or form where you're just having a Zoom meeting that is wide open and people can come and go during the entire day. It does work in terms of the after hours aspects of things, like that's been well practiced. And so the phone calls, the phone trees, the meetings after hours, all the rest does translate, but still that in-person view where you actually have folks that are coming together and literally sitting at the same table and, hey, we are part of the response team. We are part of the team that's going to get us from where we are back to being good and worry about our clients and our customers and our members and all the rest of them as well. Like that has definitely potentially been frustrated over the past year in terms of how do you get those folks together in a high intense, high stress, and highly volatile and constantly changing environment.
So you've likened incident response to Jenga, a game in which you remove a piece, your opponent removes a piece, and whoever removes the piece that causes everything to fall down loses. Now you're speaking at RSA 2021, held virtually this year, about incident response Jenga and how to react to fast moving scenarios. So what does Jenga bring into this discussion that we're having?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a few things there. I mean, data breach response is just like Jenga in many different respects. And I think we saw that most especially with kind of what we heard from and saw from FireEye in terms of things that Kevin Mandy had put out there. And in terms of other subsequent breaches since then is every little thing that gets pulled out is a different piece. It changes the dynamics, right? It could collapse the whole tower. And so it's not just a attack against one company. And maybe there was a flaw or an opening or a missed process or procedure. It turned out that it was an entire nation state and actually third-party access and coming in through a third-party appliance and process. I mean, these are the things that every little tug of every little pull, every little thing that gets unraveled, it's different and it changes massively the response. At some point in time, then it becomes it's not just about us. We are a victim, but it's not just about us. This is about the entire ecosystem of, well, maybe other cybersecurity companies. Oh, turns out it was. And then how about maybe other high-tech companies? Turns out it was. Governmental agencies. Turns out it was. And how about just many of the top companies in the world actually using this? Wow. That really changes the dynamics. And so in the game of Jenga, you constantly have to move and manipulate things and think 3 and 4 and 5 steps ahead. That is what we are more so seeing with data breaches, intrusions, that are occurring these days, is that it really is multi-headed. It's not just about you as I'm the victim and the sole victim as part of this. It's very much multidimensional there. And so it definitely, right, brings in many things we talked about actually, right? The speed at which they move, the diversity in terms of how many people need to be brought into this, because it's not just, right, single-headed. It's not just one scope of one attack. And we're seeing, right, that push in terms of time to react, time to respond being crunched down even further in terms of things. So yes, we're going to go through a 2-hour learning lab this year at RSA focused on, we're going to constantly be pulling out different pieces of this. My co-presenter, James Shreve, and I we're going to weave into it a multitude of different items of, let's pull out this brick and see what happens, this brick and see what happens, and see how people respond. And actually, we're going to take the cybersecurity folks that are in attendance and give them different roles. Some will be in security, but others will be in privacy, compliance, legal, the board, PR, internal, external. We're going to have them wear different hats so that they can see things from a different perspective. So it's going to be wild. It's going to be great.
So this is like a Jenga game where you don't get to choose the time or the place in which you're going to play, but you can maybe practice in advance. And I think we continue to see, I mean, we've talked at depth in the past about best practices for these kinds of things: data breach response, incident response. Planning ahead seems to be the number one takeaway. And yet so many organizations, they suffer a ransomware attack, for example, they go to retrieve all of the necessary contact phone numbers they'll need to deal with it, and oh no, they've been crypto locked.
They've been encrypted.
Them out. Right. And so, what piece of advice would you give organizations? Where do they start? How do we short circuit this "we didn't think about this stuff in advance" problem that we see too often?
Rip the items from the headlines. Pick 5 of them. Get them done in a year, right? Pretty easy to do. Ransomware, some third-party access to some tool you're using that also gets breached. The wayward employee, the person who loves to click with that index finger, the good old-fashioned brute force they got in somehow, some way, whatever, it doesn't matter. And just, right, those 5 items, practice them. The other thing is this, is that if you sit there and you say, hey, we've practiced enough. We got the team, we got the this, we got the that. You know what? Grab someone else in so that they can throw a grenade in the room and say, have you thought about this angle? Sometimes, right, some teams have practiced so much that they're getting a little myopic. Broaden that out and bring in people that are not a usual part about the response so that you can get some diversity of thought, some other insight. It could be a third-party external party that you bring in, third-party legal counsel you bring in. It could be somebody from a different group of the company. It could be somebody from this newly appointed to your board of directors. Bring them in so you get that different thought. So you're not walking with blinders on, but you gotta practice,
Well, Chris, it is always a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you so much for your insights.
Hey, not a problem. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it.
I've been speaking with Dr. Chris Pierson of BlackCloak about incident response. I'm Mathew Schwartz with Information Security Media Group. Thanks for joining us.